listening to Smash the Bug podcast. My name is Joseph, and
I'm Jesse.
We are here to bring you a conversation about e-commerce development, and specifically how you can become a excellent or great e-commerce developer. Today's focus is kind of along a big theme of ours here lately about debugging, finding and solving problems quickly and effectively.
That's right, that's what we love to do. And this episode is brought to you from a unique location over the lake.
Yes, I think there is actually, there's probably a good 8 foot of water below us. So if something happens and you see this disappear, real quick, the screen blanks out, that will mean that the dock failed.
Yeah, which would not be any good for us.
Considering I cannot swim, that would be a moment of tragedy.
Yeah, let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, we'll hope that won't happen. But the reason we're here is because we wanted to get away for a couple days to focus on how we can better serve you, who we are, what is our approach to bringing this great content to you. And I've been super excited the plans that we have pulled together over these past couple days, and we thought, hey, while we're out here, let's just record a podcast, and there seemed like there was no better place to record the podcast than over the lake.
That's right. You can't beat the weather, which is now finally sunny. But that also makes me think of the value, even for developers, of unplugging once in a while. And
absolutely.
Literally disconnecting from the internet on some level and getting away and getting to a nice location and recharging and like resetting your perspectives on what's important and everything like that. I'm trying to clear the mind in that sort of way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good. I feel refreshed because ultimately, I mean, we get into the grind of things and we're pushing on big projects. We're under a big deadline right now, and just getting away for a couple days. And even though you could say it's still work related, what we're doing is still work related, but it's not like we're just cranking code out, solving problems for 8-10 hours a day. It's just it's a different type of work, and it's incredibly refreshing.
That's right, change of pace, and that's a really valuable thing to do. And we're collaborating some too. We're going to talk about collaborating today in a couple different ways.
Well, one of the great examples of collaboration actually came from, I would say was a slightly humorous example. That was yesterday. So yesterday was rainy. It was not a good day to be out. Well, I guess in the dock here would have been okay, but otherwise it was kind of a bit of a lousy day to be outside. So we were inside, did a lot of great work and thinking inside. But one thing we noticed throughout the day, there kept like this lightning flash, but it wasn't followed by any thunder. And but it happened regularly enough, we kept thinking it was lightning, but it kind of wasn't at the same time.
Yeah, one of those super annoying, like, whoop, whoop, from the light fixture, or at least that's where we discovered it was coming from.
Yeah. So the question was how to fix that.
Well, my solution was you just go over to the light switch and turn off the lights. But it kind of gets a little dark in there, but we're on our computers.
We have to remember, we just ate lunch, and there's that, that carb sleep thing that's that hangover that happens after you eat a nice delicious lunch. And food is definitely part of vacations, and Jesse recommends turning off the lights.
Yeah, I know. Well, I
that would have sealed the deal.
I didn't think about that aspect of going to sleep, but now that I think about it, a nap could have been pretty nice.
No, we had work to do. We had to talk about stuff.
We did.
So all of that to say, Jesse's idea was that, but ultimately it made me think that as e-commerce developers, we can go to the most drastic solution, but there could be the fix that is available about 10% of the way to the most drastic solution.
That's right. Yeah, because that turning off the lights was one of those things where that's a easy thing that fixes the problem, and I'm using air quotes there. Because no more flickering at that point. Right. But it doesn't really fix the problem because then we don't have light.
And it would have caused a carb-induced coma, which would have completely eliminated any work we were trying to get done.
Yes, counterproductive.
Right. So the suggestion was, and I will remain unnamed as far as who made the suggestion, but the suggestion was, what if we unscrewed the light bulb that was causing the problem? Because let's just say this person, I'm not looking at who, but this person was...
Just pointing.
Yeah, well, if you're listening to this, there was some pointing going on, using air pointing. This person was in. I noticed. Well, let's just say, okay. I noticed with this light bulb was flickering and proposed a solution which ultimately was a little bit warm. So we had to go fetch a pair.
Well, that's the thing. I was like, Joseph stands up to do it, and I'm trying to save him the pain of getting burned on a light bulb. And so I'm like, whoa, you can't do that like right now. So it was like, oh, no problem.
We're gonna go fetch a pair of underwear or something, a pair of socks. We'll get this problem dealt with, and the problem was dealt with, so that was good.
Yeah,
problem solved, and we got it dealt with. So it relates totally to debugging, because just because you can identify the most drastic solution to a problem does not mean it is the best solution. It could be causing other problems. And actually, let me just say this real quick. That we were dealing with an issue here this week where we were trying to tune and I'll talk more about this later, but we were trying to tune call it a watcher for specific events. And ultimately, we could have just said this watcher executes on all events. But that would introduce other performance problems, very clearly introduce performance problems, versus taking the time to get in there and say, okay, well, when does this watcher really need to trigger? And we work off of that. And so I think that was a great illustration of just because you can go most drastic solution does not mean it's the best solution.
But it also makes me think of something else where we were working as a team. We were working together. Like there was one person thinking of this and another person thinking of that. And that's like a problem that I ran into this week, where I worked through some things and then eventually got on the phone with you, and we worked through those things together, and were able to arrive at a solution more efficiently because of that code pairing, that working together aspect. And so, in an example as simple as a light bulb, that's what we were doing, though, working together.
Absolutely. I think we underestimate the value that our team members provide. Again, with context. Like, again, it wasn't like me seeing this light bulb flickering and Jesse's upstairs or in some other area, and I say, Jesse, come fix this light bulb. It's flickering. Like, there was the context that was provided, and that context is so critical to getting effective help. You have to have that context in order to get the help adequately. All right, so I wanted to clarify something we had talked about in our last podcast, Jesse and I here, and that was I was pretty pleased about views in MySQL. The point is iterative and being iterative about ideas and humble about ideas. That's why I'm coming back here, because as I was looking at this, I did some extra research, and I found out that, to be frank, views are not an ideal solution to this type of problem. The reason is that a view is actually calculated real time. Like when you hit the view, when you retrieve rows from this view, it is actually running those original queries in the database. So you get no performance benefit whatsoever. In fact, I understand that there's some places that even ban the use of views. So I think that there is value in views, but I think it's a little bit less than the use case that I presented. And so ultimately, the solution that I came to, that I rebuilt part of that, the piece of what we were working on, was to leverage our hooks inside the system to keep a indexed table up to date. So every row, for every row in this table that we're working with, had a reference back to that original table, and there was just a column for indexed status, I think is the name of that column, and we updated the value. We're updating the value in that. So it's just a MySQL query to drop it in there. So it's not calculated real time, but it does require building a solid system for managing that hook to ensure that those statuses are always kept up to date.
That's great, and I think that's part of what we do as developers is we continue to learn, and we look back at code that we wrote a year ago, and we're like, oh, okay, well, that's how I might do it differently, and that's what you're doing with this, is that aspect of like, I learned something about this, and that's pretty cool to be able to share it. Yeah, absolutely, and I want to clarify that because we want to give good advice here, and overusing views is not a solution to performance problems. Let's just make that real clear, and it was a great learning opportunity for me. And ultimately, that's one thing. We don't ever want to just not learn new ideas. Learning new ideas is really important. But on the other hand, we always want to be balancing that and making sure we fully learn this new idea. Because ultimately, again, a view could be the right solution sometimes. And we want to reach for that tool in our tool bag. But it was not the right solution for this specific problem. Yeah, that's great. And that brings me back to the other thing that I had brought up briefly about us working through a problem together earlier last week. And I had been working on that problem and hadn't come up with a solution, hadn't come up with the root of the problem either, and was working my way through that. without success, frankly. But part of the problem was coming back to my own lack of patience on that. I wasn't careful enough as I worked through it, and was too quick to jump to some conclusions or try to find the problem and didn't slow it down enough. And so what I did after working on it for a while was I ended up getting on the phone with you, and I was like, hey, could you just put another pair of eyes on this code for me and kind of give another perspective on this? And so you were willing to work through those things. And one of the things that we started doing that I liked was going back, looking where the data was loaded, and thinking about the root of the problem. So often, some of the things that we do are so far away from the root. It's really hard to figure out where that is originally.
Let's see if we can just do a really quick overview as far as what that problem was. Like, because it's just to set the context. Yeah, why don't you just try to quickly run through it, because I think that'll help people understand exactly what we're coming at here.
Yeah. So we had a page that was in the customer account, the Magento customer account on the front end, and there was some products there loaded, technically called quote items, and this product page was crashing for no apparent reason when the customer was not logged in. So we actually added a little bit of a kind of a layer, middleware, something that allowed, in some cases, some unauthenticated users to be able to see this order page.
Right.
So in some specific case, this person with the special link can see their... Hey there. Okay, well, that was an interesting interruption with a couple friendly guys driving their boat by and asking us how we were doing. Anyways, as I was talking about with this other thing, so unauthenticated, authenticated. What was really interesting about the problem is it actually didn't have anything to do with that. And that was...
But it seemed like it did.
It sure did, yeah. Well, because in one place it didn't work and the other place it did work. And that was one of the things that tripped me up. So we're rendering out these products or quote items, and in one of these quote items out of like 8, there was a product that was missing. So the quote items have this kind of like weird way of loading up the products, and it's related to custom options and products within the quote items.
It's obtuse.
Yeah, it gets a little bit deep. And so I was trying to figure out why one of the products wasn't loading into this quote item. And again, just on one of the sides.
Well, because when it was trying to be loaded into that item, it was non-existent, and it threw a... basically, why are you trying to access this, call this method on null? Like, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly. And this is like way away from where these quote items are being loaded.
Yeah.
Like it's quite a ways down the call stack from that. And so what Joseph and
just be clear, not down the call stack, it's over and down, right?
That's true. Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's like calling a method on a method on a method of a method. Like, it was a long ways from where that is. Somehow Magento kind of nests this product into this custom option. So it's trying to load this. It's not there. It's saying, oh, we're having a problem. So I am working through the call stack with Joseph, and we go back to that assign products method in was it the quote item collection or something like this?
Quote collection, I think load items, and then inside that load items, I think it was, the quote item collection, you're right, assign products protected method, I think.
Yep. And so we ended up pulling the SQL query out of that in order to, and as soon as we did that, like, we both recognized the problem immediately as the shared products, which this particular product wasn't in a shared product. So that was the reason that this was crashing out. But like, again, we were dealing with custom options over on the one side. Like, the code looked like it was a custom option.
Totally different problem.
It was completely different, but getting on the phone with you, so getting that second pair of eyes and working through that debug stack trace, Xdebug stack trace, patiently, carefully, methodically, got us back to it in less than an hour. And I had probably already spent an hour on it. And obviously some of those things would be good to do anyways. And
absolutely.
Just making sure.
That was not wasted.
Exactly. But still just putting perspective in it. We weren't spinning our wheels by going methodically. And sometimes it's hard to feel like we're actually making progress when we're going slow and steady and we're investigating all the things. But I think it kind of highlighted to me the value of having a team. And being there with somebody else to be able to look over my shoulder and say, hey, have you thought about this? Or no, let's stop on this one and go this more carefully.
Oh, for sure. And I think the the thing is easy to just get locked into. Oh, this product is missing because it was not set in this part of the call stack. And there are those times. I don't think it's overly common. Like I couldn't say it happens all the time, but this felt like a fairly rare situation. But it was like a distant relative. It wasn't like a brother or sister, for example, or a grandchild or a grandparent causing the problem in this case. This was, I think if we were to put this was like a great aunt or uncle. I mean, not quite, but I mean, that's literally, I mean, it was definitely a bit of a distant relationship. And just being able to get in there and solve it, and being very careful, because that was the thing, we almost missed that when we were working through that, because there was a list of product IDs that was pulled out. The quote item collection had the product case. It said basically, get these product IDs. Great. Now it ran it then through the products collection, past those entity IDs in there, and that was where the problem was. So the product ID was there for most of the way, except for that last final step. And it would be easy to miss it, because ultimately it was aware entity ID in, and then had the list of IDs, so it didn't even come back in the row, in the order that it was passed in, like in the in query, right? So it was as long as those IDs matched. So yeah, it was an interesting challenge to work through.
Yeah, and it made me think of something else that I thought of this last week, was that it's good to not always just use a shotgun approach of like seeing what will work without really having an idea why you think it might work. And I see that sometimes, and it's easy for me to do, is to just like kind of try to spray solutions at a problem. Mm-hmm. But there is something to be said for first thinking about a solution, like, why do I think this solution will work? And there can be times...
That's a great question, by the way.
Yeah. There can be times to say, I don't know why, but I'm going to just try this. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, especially when it comes to like environment things or things like that, where you're working with your computer and your setup and Nginx or PHP or something like that, like not just spray a whole bunch of solutions at a problem.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that is, I love that. And that's where it comes back to this TAD framework, right? I mean, and that's where we're working through ourselves. It's like being willing and able to, maybe you identify the solution. Maybe your experience tells you this is the solution. Great, check it out. But don't latch onto that being the solution. If it doesn't work out, does it pan out? Well, go on to something else, and you're going to be an effective debugger because of that.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah, you can tell I've been spending a lot of time on this price indexer stuff. I love it. One. It's absolutely an absolute blast of a challenge to work through, just because there's so many complexities that is involved. This one, the prices need to be recalculated because they take information from a ton of inputs. These prices need to be recalculated when a product attribute is changed, or when one of these extra supplementary data tables is also changed via the API. So that's a great hook. We can update it via the API. But we kept having these issues where products kept being missed, being updated. And, with the API, it's not like I go and trigger something myself. It takes manual, it's automatic action. And so this is where logging is incredibly important. And of course we had good logs and we were logging information out. It seemed like it was good, but I had this really cool revelation that happened this week. So I kept thinking this is a problem with we're missing a hook somewhere. There's something that's being called to be updated, but it's just not being. We're missing the hook. We're not understanding that this is a call to actually that needs to update these products.
So like you get a REST API call and then your indexer doesn't run.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Somewhere.
Yeah. And so
that's the thought.
Exactly. So what are we missing? What API call are we missing to? What API call are we missing? And that's what I was just working like crazy on that. Well, in the process of that, I ended up building, just threw together, took like 30 minutes or less, honestly, a UI component grid inside Magento, basically inside the Magento admin, to list the values from this queuing table. The queuing table set up products to be able to be re-indexed, get their prices re-indexed. And just to be clear, we are not using the Magento re-indexing component we've kind of built our own. It's that I think works better in this type of situation. And it was once I loaded up that grid for the first time and I started reviewing the items in that grid, which is also ended up being kind of a log as well, that I noticed the bug that was happening. In other words, visualizing this data. It's one thing to see log entries in the log file, and don't get me wrong, those are incredibly valuable. Just helped a customer today, was getting some really nasty spam, and was able to triangulate those web form entries with access logs, which helped me to find exactly the IP address, and we got that kicked out. So logs are really
great. I feel like a detective at the time.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me feel pretty good when we do that. But log files are great, but sometimes it's that visualization of those logs where you're able to see, and not even like fancy charts, oh, this SKU is only entered in once. That was that light bulb moment for me. Well, why is this SKU only entered in once? Well, my query to see if a SKU should be entered in the second time was too restrictive.
That is awesome. I love the creativity that you have with that. Well, yes, I can say it because in the way that you kind of thought through and figured out this solution.
I didn't. That was the problem. I didn't think that. I was, again, this was an example. I think I was somewhat locked into my solution, and I didn't think outside the box until I happened across that. That's why I was kind of surprised. So just so you don't think too much of me.
Yes, exactly. Until. But that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, you eventually got it.
Right.
And there's so many of our listeners, too, that are like those people who are like fighting through things and then they get it and they're like deserve steak dinner or some sort of like,
ice cream, I don't know, whatever treat is your favorite.
Some sort of hero treatment sort of thing.
A cold beverage.
Something because you just fixed this huge problem that's gonna help your team, that's gonna help your client, it's gonna help somebody down the road, which is pretty awesome.
Which is great. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's it, and it's what makes, I think, e-commerce development particularly exciting. I mean, every area of development has those aspects, but e-commerce developers, I feel like we're kind of an interesting and unique bunch, and we got to solve a lot of problems, and they're pretty urgent usually because our merchants' money is on the line. Like they're losing orders, possibly depending on the problem, every minute that we're not able to solve this problem, and so the pressure just keeps ramping up. We got to solve problems fast, and that's why we have this podcast. Is to help you solve problems faster, because the faster you solve problems, the more appreciated you will be by the merchants, the people you are working with, and the more irreplaceable you are in your job. And the more irreplaceable in your job, what happens then?
I don't know.
Okay, well, that was a good one. I took you for a loop there. The more irreplaceable you're in your job, the better pay you get, and the happier you really are in the long run.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
That was a good one.
Drew blank.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I guess we ate lunch a while ago, so we can't blame it on a carb coma. Oh well. Anyways, thank you for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure being able to spend this time over the lake here with you, talking about debugging, problem solving, some of the things that are really near and dear to our heart. If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to subscribe on YouTube, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Google Podcasts, on Apple. You hear me say this every time. I hope you're already subscribed, actually. But if not, I understand. Please tell me why you're not subscribed if you haven't already subscribed, because we want to bring you this content that is so compelling, so awesome. It's like, what else would you do other than just click the subscribe button? Or
and if you're subscribed, share it with your friends.
That's right, because I hope this is an absolute inspiration to you. We are in the trenches just alongside you. We are dealing with the same problems you deal with. And feel free to write us with other things that you would find helpful for us to talk about. So, until next time.